Quick disclaimer, this case involves graphic depictions of grievous human injury. Welcome back to Horrifyingly Fascinating, the channel that aims to educate, horrify, and fascinate you to varying degrees. There are few things more fascinating and horrifying than the physiology of human beings and their ability to withstand various extremes. From inhospitable environments to horrific injuries, it seems that wherever you look, there are documented accounts detailing the very extremes that the human body can endure. Today, we're looking at the case of Phineas Gage, a railroad worker in the mid-1800s who was subject to, and survived, one of the most horrific head injuries imaginable. Phineas Gage was said to have been a headstrong and intelligent individual, the eldest of 5 siblings and raised in the state of New Hampshire. It was thought that during his time working at local farms, he developed a keen interest in the use of explosives, which was a skill he transferred when he began working on the railroad. He was hired as a blasting foreman while working on the Hudson River Railroad, overseeing the use of explosives in order to clear rock and earth for the new construction. The process involved boring a hole into rock, adding blasting powder, then packing out with inert material such as sand or clay in order to focus the blast. The incident that would go down in history happened on 13th of September 1848. Much like every time before, a hole was bored, blasting powder added, but before the hole could be fully packed out, a tamping iron sparked against rock, igniting the blasting powder and hurling the tool up through the hole, spearing Phineas through his face, from the upper jaw, behind his left eye and up through his brain and out through the skull. The bar would land some 25 metres away from the blast site, and Phineas was thrown to the ground. Incredibly, after a few minutes of muscle spasms, Phineas sat up, began talking, and even managed to walk away unaided, despite a literal portion of his brain being blown out of the top of his head. Phineas was taken to the local township, where he was staying in a hotel, whereupon he was visited by the local physician by the name of Edward H. Williams. Naturally, the doctor was astounded at Phineas's ability to walk and talk in spite of his grievous injury. During the conversation, Phineas would begin vomiting blood, and Dr. Williams would note that during this bout of vomiting, about half a cup of brain matter would ooze out of the hole atop Phineas's head before he collapsed. Later that day, with the assistance of a Dr. John Martin Harlow, Dr. Williams would attempt to clean and sterilise Phineas's wound, cleaning out brain matter, congealed blood and bone fragments before closing the wound with adhesive strips. The next day, Phineas was still showing signs of awareness and consciousness, even still recognising his mother and uncle who had, upon hearing of this horrific accident, travelled 30 miles in order to visit him. The next day, unsurprisingly, Phineas's condition began to seriously deteriorate, and by the 12th day following the incident, Phineas would slip into a semi-comatose state, unable to form words. Upon inspection of the wound, it would be noted that Phineas's wound had begun sprouting some sort of fungus. Dr. Harlow, apparently not one to give up no matter how dire the patient's condition, would once again clean the wound, cutting away the fungus that was literally sprouting from Phineas's exposed brain tissue, applying silver nitrate in order to disinfect the wound, and applying fresh dressings. Dr. Harlow's dogged determination would prove effective in ensuring Phineas's survival, and he began to make a slow but steady recovery. 10 weeks following the incident, he would be well enough to travel back to his parents' home in New Hampshire, though it would be noted that Phineas was now physically feeble, presumably from muscle deterioration during his recovery, but aside from that, his personality was fundamentally changed, with former friends and acquaintances describing him as childish and unable to control his emotions. There are other videos on this case which describe Phineas as a raging psychopath who routinely beat his wife and child following this incident. However, reliable sources make no mention of a wife or a child. He simply never married or had children, at least not on record. Whether or not he became uncontrollably aggressive, there doesn't seem to be a reliable source. However, Phineas did later travel to Chile to work for a coach company, so it seems to me that he must have been of reasonably sound mind in order to make the trip. In May 1860, Phineas would succumb to a seizure that would last over 5 minutes and pass away. Whether or not this was related to his injury isn't clear, however it seems relatively safe to assume it was. Following his death, the medical marvel that was Phineas Gage would have his skull and the iron that pierced it placed on display in the Warren Museum, where you can still see it today. And there we have the horrifyingly fascinating case of Phineas Gage, a man who took a mortal wound to the head, sprouted fruiting fungus bodies from his exposed brain, recovered to an amazing degree and went on to live out his remaining days being a productive member of society. Thanks for listening to Horrifyingly Fascinating, the channel that aims to educate, horrify and fascinate you to varying degrees. Stay safe and see you next time.